I recently put up a poll asking you if I should do a full review of the new album by Fit for a King, or should I bring back my weekly metal series, which I haven't done in a few months, and the results were actually kind of close, but the majority said to bring back the series. So what I'm going to do is talk about 5 albums that I was able to listen to yesterday. These reviews are basically just shortened versions of my normal reviews. I'll talk about some of the songs, my opinions, and I'll give a score at the end. So with that being said, let's jump into it. I'm going to start with a new album by Fit for a King called Lonely God. They are a metalcore band from Texas. They formed in 2007. First album came out in 2011. I've been following them since 2020. I reviewed the last 2 albums. One was The Path from 2020, which was one of my first album reviews on this channel. I also reviewed The Hell We Create from 2022. So for that reason, I wanted to do a full review, but I wasn't sure if there was interest in it. But let me talk a little bit more about this new album. The new album has 12 songs. It's 40 minutes long. It has a few collaboration tracks, such as Monolith featuring Alpha Wolf, Technium featuring The Plot New, and Witness the End featuring Chris Motionless. Now granted, I don't know who the first 2 bands are, but I know who Chris Motionless is because I'm familiar with his band Motionless in White. That was actually the first song I listened to, as it was one of the singles. I thought the single was pretty good actually. It has this music video where they're playing inside a church, and the lead singer of the band appears to be this type of preacher, and then Chris Motionless comes in with all this corpse paint. This is a very heavy song. It's actually heavier than I remember this band being. The song has both the harsh and clean vocals, and I would even say there are some black metal elements, so I really like the song. With that being said, I didn't love the entire album. The opening track is called Begin the Sacrifice. This one had a music video that's very well done, pretty graphic. It actually looks like a movie. But the problem was the music itself. I thought the verse sections were a little too commercial and polished. So it wasn't a song that I liked a lot. I think this album has a few examples of that, where the songs I liked a lot were the first song I talked about called Witness the End, but then the other ones where I thought they were too polished. Another example would be track number 2, The Temple, where I would say the same thing applies. The next song, Extinction, sounded too much like a deathcore song that doesn't really have much melody or structure. The song No Tomorrow was kind of commercial sounding as well. Then there is more of a power ballad with the track Shelter, but the album picks up the pace on the second half with the track Monolith. Towards the end of the album, there are some strong tracks like the title track, Sentient, and Blue Venom. The latter of which had more of that classic metalcore sound. So I like those tracks. But it's kind of a mixed bag for me. My score is a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you think of this and how it compares to their other albums. The next band that I have is called Terrordome, and the album is called Plagued with Violence. This is a crossover thrash metal band from Poland. The band describes their style as brutal crossover thrash. They formed in 2005, and this is their 4th full-length album. The album has 11 tracks, and it's about 33 minutes long. So most of the songs are in the 2 to 4 minute range. I thought it was a fairly enjoyable album. It reminded me of that new wave of thrash metal, something along the lines of Power Trip, but I also heard some influence from German thrash like Sodom or a band like that. The album kicks off with Chasing the Dragon with lots of energy, fast-paced guitar riffs, and intense drumming. There was a track Beast Sharp Razor Cut with some more of that old school thrash sound, and I heard some Slayer vibes in some of the guitar riffs. Then there's a song Goat Killers, which is just 2.5 minutes of non-stop thrash. By track number 4, they start to change it up a little bit with The Torture Continues. They had more of a mid-paced sound with sound bites in the intro and more melody in the lead guitar. The same can be said for the track Bow Down to the Antichrist, which is where I could hear a little bit of that crossover sound coming in. It was another song where they slowed the pace down a little bit. The next 2 songs are in Polish, so I'm not going to attempt to pronounce them, but track number 6 is 2.5 minutes of pure brutality. Track number 7 also has a name in Polish. It's just pure thrash. This one actually reminded me a little bit of some early Sepultura, so that was cool. There's a 1-minute interlude track called Massive Perjury, going into the next track, Sorry for Being Late, which had more of that signature, brutal, crossover thrash sound. The penultimate track is called Plagued with Violence. This one was pretty straightforward. It has lots of chugging, a little bit more melody, and I like that one. The last song is called Satanic Decree. It's just some straightforward, brutal, very fast thrash metal. Overall, I like the album a lot. It's some very heavy thrash metal. There's some variety on the album, but it doesn't all sound the same. Every song has its own unique flavor and style, and they maintain a consistent tone throughout. I thought it was pretty good. My score will be an 8 out of 10. Let me know in the comments if you're familiar with this band or have listened to any of their other stuff. The next album I have is Connect the Circle with Wolf in the Sky. They are a Norwegian progressive metal band that formed in 2019. This is their 4th full-length album. The album has 9 songs. It's about 15 minutes long. Most of the songs are in the 5 to 9 minute range. There are 3 songs in which are in the 1 to 2 minute range, so there's a lot of variety going on here. First 2 tracks are the shorter ones. First one is called Outbreak. It's an instrumental with lots of violins and cellos and orchestration. It sounds like some type of movie score for a fantasy movie. This is followed by Wolf in the Sky Part 1, which is another short track featuring the orchestration and acoustic guitars. The song has some vocals, but it sounds more like some acoustic folk metal in the beginning, but it goes into the next song. Track number 3 is one of the longer epics called A Sun Without Brightness. The song is very representative of what you're going to get on this album. There are lots of big guitar riffs, a very epic soundscape, and mostly clean and melodic vocals, and everything is just very big and epic sounding. The next song is called Sacrifice. This one is more that progressive metal sound with some guitar riffs and odd time signatures and a little bit more complexity in the sound. After this is Neverending Winter with some sludgy guitar riffs and melodic vocals. The song also has some progressive sounding guitar riffs, and there were parts that reminded me of Dream Theater. The next track, Plague, was more of an atmospheric track with a slower pace. The song featured some prominent bass guitars and some heavy chugging guitar riffs. The song had a very epic feel. Then there was a 5-minute track called On the Run, which sounded a little more like some straightforward progressive metal with lots of energy and powerful vocals. The penultimate song is called Wolf in the Sky Part 2. Short track, only about 2.5 minutes long, but it had a pretty cool progressive rock sound. The last track is an instrumental called 100 Years of Silence. This is an epic album closer that's close to 10 minutes long. It begins with some soft piano and violins. The song slowly builds up as they introduce more guitars and drums. There's a lot going on here with some surprises, such as flamenco guitars at one point in the song. Other parts of the song remind me of some of those old Metallica instrumentals like Orion with the harmonized guitars and an almost neoclassical feel. The song then takes a weird turn in the last minute where it gets kind of jazzy. Overall, I like the album. I had never heard of the band before, but I thought it was very good. My score is an 8 out of 10. I would even go up after that, or I might go up by the end of the month. Let me know in the comments if you are familiar with this band. Next, I have the band Mosquito and the album Majestas. This is a band from the UK. They are listed as experimental black metal noise industrial on the Metal Archives website. I don't listen to a lot of black metal. This one caught my attention as I'm glad I listened to them. It's their second full-length album. The album has 6 tracks. It's 44 minutes long. First track is called Organs Dissolved in Lacquer. This sounds like some of that old school black metal that I'm not really a fan of. To be honest, I almost turned off the album after the first few minutes of the song because I thought the whole album was going to sound like this, but I'm glad I didn't, because after this, they start to sound a little different. The first song has a very fuzzy and distorted black metal sound, which is kind of hard to follow if you're not familiar with the genre, but after about 2 minutes, the song started to get a little more melodic. But overall, I didn't like the opening track that much, but don't worry, things will get better. The next track was called Dead to the World. It had a slow start. There was a lot of atmospheric noise for the first minute or so, but then it brought in some softer guitars, so it kept me interested as it had a dark and creepy vibe. It was one of those songs with harsh black metal vocals and soft instrumental backdrop, so it was something I could get into. Song also had an 8-minute runtime, so there were lots of changes as the song got very brutal as it moved into the second half of the song. Third track was called Ascension, and this one had a very brutal intro with all those black metal blast beats and lots of madness, but they brought in some more atmospheric sounds on the second half, so I liked that aspect of the song. There was a song called In Reverence of Pain. This one had some clean guitars, but sounded very dark and evil sounding. It had some chanting vocals that sounded like the singer was performing some type of ritual or something. The middle of the song had lots of that old school sound. Then the song had some darker melodies with more of those blast beats. The next track was in a foreign language, possibly Arabic, but it was translated as Ode to Wine. This was probably my favorite song as it has this groovy bass guitar and some spoken vocals in a language I didn't recognize. This was one of the more experimental tracks that had some of that old school black metal sound. Probably my favorite song on the album. The final song was called To Look Upon Your Own Skeleton, and this one sounded like some classic metal at first, but then it went full black metal after this. It was another song that was not easy for me to get into as it had a very old school sound. The second half of the song had more of that atmospheric sound. Overall, I like the album a little bit, but for my listening tastes, it was kind of hard to get into completely. It might grow on me if I listen to it some more, but for now, it's a 7 out of 10. Let me know in the comments. Listen to the album. Do you think it appeals to black metal? So I'm interested in knowing if you think it's a good album. I have one more album to talk about. The band is called Anchorite. The album is called Realm of Room. It's an international band with members from Sweden, Malta, and Denmark. They've been active since 2018, and they are listed as doom metal. Although I thought they sounded like some traditional heavy metal as well. It's their second full length, their first in 5 years. The album has 8 tracks. It's 54 minutes long. All songs are in the 5 to 7 minute range. Opening track is called Realm of Ruin. It sounded like some traditional heavy metal. The guitars reminded me of some classic Judas Priest, and the vocals were big and powerful. There were lots of chugging guitars as well as some more melodic sections in the middle of the song. The next track was called The Lighthouse Chronicles. This one had a slower and more atmospheric sound. So in other words, it fit more into their doom metal genre. But that being said, some of the guitar riffs also leaned towards traditional heavy metal. The song was very dark and had lots of chugging guitars. Next song was called Devil on the Throne. This one had more of that old school sound. It sounded more like some Ronnie James Dio era Black Sabbath, maybe something along the lines of the Mob Rules album. Then there were some softer guitars and vocals on the track The Apostate's Prayer. It had a soft intro. The song picked up later. They brought in some heavier guitars and vocals. Then there was Room in a Mirror. It's where they brought back that traditional heavy metal sound with a faster pace and more old school guitar riffs. There was No Vestige of Light, which went back to that classic doom metal sound and more of those Black Sabbath inspired guitar riffs. But this one also had some creepier sections and clean guitar arpeggios. So it was another good one. This also had a very melodic guitar solo that came in a few minutes into the song. The penultimate song was called The Unforgiving Ghost. It was more of that slow traditional doom metal. It was dark and creepy and had a sound more representative of classic doom metal. This was a 7-minute song that maintained that classic doom metal sound throughout. The album ends with Kingdom Undone, which was a very melodic track. It also had that very classic doom metal sound. There were some very big vocals, as well as thick and heavy guitars. It was another song that kept that classic doom metal sound. Overall, I like the album. I think it could be an album that could grow on me. For now, I will give it an 8 out of 10. I think it has the potential to go up by the end of the month. I like the fact that it was a mix of doom and traditional heavy metal. So, as always, let me know if you are familiar with this band. Check out the video for the best metal albums of July, where I cover 13 albums from last month. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please like this video. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you have not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.